Well, if you were to look at the, I don't like to use the word, but I think it's the most accurate way of describing this. If you look at the great composers, if you were to write them down on a piece of paper, outside of these composers, what do we know about 18th and 19th century music? The answer is virtually nothing. Mm. And if you say, well, I put my hand up and I agree with that, let's talk to an expert or let's consult a musicologist. Now, these musicologists, you might imagine these people living in music archives, and they're middle-aged people who do something about music and they publish in musical journals. Let's ask them, dear sir, could you please tell us of the 20,000 composers, or at least of the 4,500 composers of the 18th century, how many of them have you actually heard? Mm. The music of these people? And the musicologist will tell you that he is an expert only in one particular area of music. You see, he hasn't heard any more music. He hasn't heard any more of the 18th or 19th century music than we have.
Right, right.
But he has specialized in his little area of medicine or the music industry to such an extent that he knows rather less than you or I. Mm. Now, so this is the strange world of the academic side of what is called musicology. But musicology, interestingly, it's not all conspiracy. There really is such a thing as musicology. Musicology is the science of music and of musical achievement, but you really don't hear very much about musicology. Musicology emerged in the late 18th century, and it was bitterly resisted by the emerging music industry. Mm. The music industry were not interested in the history of music. You must always remember that people don't want you to know about history. It's not a convenient subject, etc., because it has the habit of calling into question our idolatry, or at least our fixation with a handful of sanitized individuals. And for this reason, musicology was buried. Men such as J.N. Forkel, a German. Mm. Now, Forkel spent his entire life trying to find out whether we could determine what is good music and what is not good music. Mm. And that was his life. And how did he do that? Because everybody has a different opinion of what is good music and what is not bad music. Now, Forkel was different from everyone else. He founded the science of musicology. This man single-handedly founded the science of music. How did he do this? Yeah. Well, he spent his entire life examining the music of different composers, and he came to the conclusion that the music that is most worthy of being performed and taught, etc., was music which was of value to students of composition, which would provide them with models, or music which had the potential to become something else. Mm. And it was in this sense that he was able to say, and this was Forkel's own words, that there is coming, he said, this is Forkel in the late 18th century, there is coming a music industry which will have no distinction to make between what is good, what is bad, what is popular, what is not popular, etc. Because commercialization, or the powers of money, will shape our thinking, and if it's not been shaped, it will be shaped for us by the employees of that emerging music industry. Well, you can imagine Mr. Forkel was not very popular in Vienna, and he was not very popular anywhere else. And he became even more unpopular when he started publishing some wonderful publications showing the talents of certain composers who were not fashionable. Bach, for example. Bach was ignored by Vienna, the city of music. They knew nothing about him, except behind the scenes, a few of them marveled at Bach's music. But it was to take 20 more years after Forkel died before they finally performed in Vienna the very first piece of music by Johann Sebastian Bach. Well, he'd only been dead for 70 years at the time. So this is the music industry for Vienna. The music industry succeeded the collapse of the Holy Roman Empire.
Yes.
It became essential for Vienna to be portrayed as the city of music. Why? How did it get that title? Well, it got the title because it had to find a reason for its existence. And therefore, a nucleus of great composers who were eulogized from the very first years of the music industry were selected. And so we had the paradigm of Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn, great music, absolutely great, no question about that. But the mythology surrounding these composers had to be an integral part of the early music industry. And so it was necessary almost to rewrite the history of music. This was done in a way that was startling. It was, take for example, the last 25 years of the 18th century, that is 1775 to 1800. And just think of Vienna at that time, 1775 to 1800. Operating in that city of Vienna, the city of music, were composers whose names today almost nobody has ever heard of. And yet they were staging operas sometimes for 3-6 months, etc. I give a few names. Giuseppe Sarti. Sarti was an Italian composer of 20 operas, very popular in Vienna. Then Gazzaniga was another one. Wranitzky was another. These people were famous composers of the late 18th century in Vienna alone. But not a single one of those names is known to Van Hal, another. There were nearly 20 or 30 of them. I can assure you that not a single one of these composers was published from around 1810 onwards. They were forgotten. And in their place was the music industry. And the music industry now focused on this small number of pre-selected, eulogized individuals whose talents, of course, they lived on Mount Olympus, and the rest of us lived here on planet Earth. So there was a distance between us, we mortals, that is, and the immortals. And it's this aspect. Now you might say, well, this is unusual, but really, if you look at this within Western culture, if you were to try to find a definition of what's the most distinctive feature of Western civilization, you'd have to say that Western civilization is characterized by its individualism, the cult of the individual person, and the cult of personality, the cult of fame and of notoriety.
Yeah.
Individualism is a wonderful thing, but the individualism of Western civilization is something of a hybrid, because the civilization that we have respects individualism within the parameters of the old elitism.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Very good point. Very good point.
Yeah. And therefore you can have a statue of Mozart right next to the statue of the Emperor of Austria, in Vienna. They can be side by side with each other, and yet one of them is admired because of his individualism. And so this individualism and this cult of heroic composers filled a vacuum